Hey everyone, I'm Vladimir Jutsic. We are watching all the news happening in the United States and around the world. As always, check out these monitors behind me. These are feeds coming in to the CBS News Broadcast Center. These are feeds that are happening all across the country, all around the world. If it's breaking out there, we're going to try to bring it to you right here live. Let's begin. There's a raging wildfire in Los Angeles, which is growing, forcing thousands of evacuations as firefighters struggle to contain the massive flames. We're going to go there live. Plus, an outburst from that murder suspect, Luigi Mangione, what he shouted as he entered the Pennsylvania courthouse where he is fighting extradition. And any minute now, Secretary of State Antony Blinken is set to be grilled by lawmakers on the U.S. military withdrawal from Afghanistan. We'll bring you that long-awaited hearing as soon as it begins. This is CBS News 24/7. Fast-moving wildfires burning out of control in Southern California with a mix of high winds and low humidity, which is fueling the flames. The fire scorched more than 3,000 acres and destroyed a number of homes. It is 0% contained, with more than 20,000 people now under evacuation orders. CBS News correspondent Carter Evans is live in Malibu and joins me now to talk about this. So, Carter, I guess you must have switched live shot locations earlier this morning for CBS Mornings. There was a raging fire behind you. What's the latest on the ground now?
Well, you know, the wind has died down a little bit, so that's why you don't see as much fire behind me, and you see the smoke rising straight up in the air. So this is really a good sign. You know, Vlad, this had the potential to be a horrific fire. If the winds had been as strong as forecast, I think we would have lost a lot more homes than we did. As it stands, there are a handful of homes that have been lost, about 15 structures. And the good news right now, they've actually moved this up to 7% containment, so firefighters are making progress.
So earlier, you were also reporting firefighters conducted an aerial drop almost immediately behind you in the dark. How are they able to do this in 24/7 rescue conditions?
Yeah, so this was pretty exciting, and you could tell when it's about to happen. Usually you'll get a flare up, and then this one was right behind us, and it flared up, and then all of a sudden there's a helicopter circling overhead. They make a pass, they kind of get an idea of where it is, and they plan their route of attack, and then they come back and make a second run and drop the water, and that was right behind us. We got all the action on that one. They doused those flames and put them out pretty quickly. And you asked how they're able to fly at night. Night vision goggles is the answer. I mean, look at this mountainous terrain. Would you want to fly a helicopter low here? They're wearing night vision goggles, and that's how they're able to do it.
Wow, incredible work by those firefighters, and you as well, Carter. Thank you very much. Stay safe out there. All right, let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with the first look at the national forecast. Hi, Grant.
Hey, good morning, Vlad. So, look, the good news out west is that, look, conditions are a little bit improved from yesterday. Yesterday, wind gusts were upwards of 80, nearly 90 miles per hour in some places. So we're seeing the winds relax, but still, we do have some red flag warnings, especially up for the morning hours there for L.A. and Ventura counties, where wind gusts could still be up around 42, maybe even close to 55 miles per hour. The humidity still impressively low, 5 to 15%. Yesterday, we had relative humidity values down near 1% in some instances. It was incredibly dry yesterday, not to mention also windy. So dry fuels in the ground. This red flag warning is going to go through the rest of the day, though we do see some improvement in that fire danger, but still fire concerns all the way down through Southern California, down to the Mexico border. So we'll watch those conditions today, but after today, we do start to see some improvement. Meanwhile, along the east, a pretty strong storm system is going to bring the threat for severe weather to over 10 million people from the Carolinas all the way into the Northeast. Damaging winds will be the primary concern, but we could see some tornadoes through eastern North Carolina today. This low pressure system tracks north as the cold front clears the coast later today. We'll see some potential for flooding up towards the Northeast, but behind that system, another blast of Arctic air will ignite that lake effect snow machine once again, where some places downwind of the lakes, Vlad, could pick up an additional, you guessed it, 1 to 3 feet of snow over the next few days.
Oh, boy. All right, we'll be watching. Grant, thank you very much. Okay, New York officials are working to get that suspected shooter of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson back to the state to face those murder charges. Lawyers for Luigi Mangione contested extradition at a hearing in Pennsylvania yesterday. He's now being held without bail. On his way to the courthouse, Mangione shouted at reporters. Watch this.
Luigi, did you do it? And it's completely unjust and an insult to the intelligence of the American people.
Let's bring in CBS News correspondent Lilia Luciano, who's in Altoona, Pennsylvania, and joins me now to talk more about this. So Lilia, tell us more about that outburst from Mangione, and did he have the same temperament in the courtroom yesterday?
Well, that was surprising, Vlad, to see that outburst. I mean, especially when you consider what police told us about what happened when he was arrested at the McDonald's, where, yes, they said he was visibly shaken, but it seems like he was answering questions, cooperating at first, but that he was arrested calmly and wasn't either resisting or turning violent. Yesterday, here's the sense that I got from that outburst in front of the media, in front of the cameras, and from what I experienced inside that courtroom, is that he potentially is making it a bit of a show. He seemed performative in court. He showed up with with very straight standing, kind of confident. I don't know. I felt like at times he felt like he was. What's the word that I'm looking for? I don't want to say despondent, but like defiant. Like he was eyebrows up, kind of like somebody who feels like this is all beneath him. And that's part of what he said in that outburst. He said, this is an insult. This is an injustice, an insult to Americans' intelligence. He looked back. I felt like he made eye contact a few times, but he was staring at where the media was and seeing who was around. But he just had an attitude of like being annoyed, at times even bored, restless throughout the process. He responded at one point and jumped in and spoke into his attorney's microphone, which he's not supposed to do, and which his attorney told him to stop talking when he was being described by the prosecutor, by the district attorney here in Altoona, as a fugitive. He responded something like, I just bought the mask, when they were trying to say that the masks that he had were kind of proof or evidence that he was a flight risk and therefore should be denied bail. What happened yesterday? He was denied bail. The extradition, which I'm hearing from legal experts, it's rare that he would be contesting it, but he is contesting it. His attorney keeps saying, I haven't seen any evidence that connects him to the murder. Of course, NYPD investigators there are working as fast as they can to connect him to the crime scene, to have a solid case. But the attorney says that the state of Pennsylvania, the Commonwealth, has not given him the proper documents to even begin the extradition. So there's a delay game here, and there's a speed-up process over in New York.
So that extradition that he's attempting to fight, Lilia, how will that complicate the opportunity for investigators here in New York to interrogate him?
Investigators are doing all the work with all of the evidence they have, and Altoona PD told me yesterday that all of the evidence that they gathered, it's already in the hands of the NYPD. They want nothing to do with this case in a way, even though they have one case. But with the homicide, they're saying, look, we're a small agency. They have all the resources. They're the ones with the murder investigation. So they're turning everything over to them. The delay is more in the procedure. Governor Kathy Hochul yesterday said that she will sign a warrant for his extradition. Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg said something along the same lines about how they want him extradited ASAP. So how long this delay and this technical delay, and look, it sounds like the attorney is saying something that might have been a failure of the prosecution here of not providing the proper documentation with the official charges. It sounds like a technicality, but it still buys him 2 weeks that the judge gave the defense team to basically request the proper documentation. Beyond that, it's possible that the extradition order that comes from or warrant that comes from the governor of New York could supersede that. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll be watching, and I know you will as well. Lilia reporting this morning from Altoona, Pennsylvania. We appreciate it. All right, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is set to travel to the Middle East this week, where he'll make stops in Jordan and Turkey for talks on the situation in Syria. But the U.S. has around 900 troops still deployed to the country to help prevent ISIS from reemerging, and there are concerns that extremists could seize on the power vacuum following the collapse of the Assad regime. CBS News foreign correspondent Hallie Williams has more from eastern Syria.
We have just crossed from Iraq here into eastern Syria. This region, which is about a quarter of Syria's territory, is controlled by American-backed fighters. They are known as the Syrian Democratic Forces, or SDF. Now, around 5 years ago, the SDF defeated ISIS here in Syria with US help, including weapons and airstrikes. The SDF overran the so-called Islamic State, and to this day, they are holding thousands of ISIS prisoners in jails and camps here. And like it or not, the US is deeply involved in this region, with multiple US military bases here in eastern Syria and around 900 American troops in Syria. But Syria right now is a potentially dangerous cocktail, with no one group in control of the whole country and terrorists still at large. In recent days, the US military has pummeled ISIS hideouts here, trying to prevent the terrorists using the fall of the Syrian regime to stage a comeback. And our sources in the region tell us they are worried that ISIS could use the instability to try to help their operatives escape from the jails and camps where they're being held. Back to you.
All right, Holly, thank you very much. Over to Florida now. We're awaiting the start of the hearing for the man accused of trying to assassinate Donald Trump, Ryan Ruth. He faces charges stemming from a September incident at the Trump International Golf Club in West Palm Beach. I want to bring in CBS News national correspondent Manuel Bojorquez. He joins me now from Fort Pierce, Florida. So, Manny, walk the audience through what we can expect today.
Yeah, this is set to start in just a few minutes. It's a status hearing, essentially a check to make sure that everything is on track to start the trial at the trial date that was set by the judge, which is February 10th of next year. But the defense in this case is now asking for a delay. They don't want this case to start until December of 2025. The reason why, they say there's just so much evidence that they are still reviewing that they feel in order to provide a proper defense, they need more time. We're talking about cell phone evidence, surveillance evidence that has been turned over to them in this legal process known as discovery. So we'll see today if the judge makes a ruling on that. The prosecution has said that they're open to a slight delay, but that December of next year is simply too long a delay in their view. Vlad?
So, Manny, does his Ruth's prior criminal history play a role at all in these proceedings?
Yeah, we'll really have to see. You know, these are the kind of rules that are set by judges at the beginning of a trial where the lawyers really argue whether things can be admitted or not. So the judge will have to make a ruling on what is admissible. But at the very least, a jury will hear about those 5 charges he faces for that attempted assassination, according to the prosecution, that they tried to carry out in September of this year over at the Trump golf course in West Palm Beach.
All right, Manny Bojorquez for us this morning. Manny, thanks. A temporary victory for conspiracy theorist Alex Jones. Why a judge blocked the sale of his Infowars site to The Onion. Details next. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Overnight, a federal bankruptcy judge rejected the sale of Infowars to The Onion. The satirical news site won Alex Jones' website in a recent bankruptcy auction, but the judge cited concerns about transparency during the process. Now, the trustee charged with overseeing Jones' bankruptcy will determine the next steps. You'll, of course, remember that Alex Jones was forced to sell Infowars to repay the $1.5 billion he owes to the families of the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting victims. A jury found him liable for falsely claiming that the massacre was a hoax. Inflation is still top of mind in Washington, and on Main Street, new data out this morning shows consumer prices ticked up 0.3% last month. That's according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The CPI is a key inflation gauge that will likely impact the Fed's final rate decision of 2024. CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady is here in Studio 55 and joins me to discuss. What's up?
CPI Day.
CPI Day. So what do we learn?
Basically, I think the headline here is that the fight in the progress to bring down inflation has hit a wall. So a couple last months, right, we've actually seen that number tick up. 2 months ago, it was 2.4%. Then it was 2.6%. Today, it's 2.7%. And remember, the Fed's looking to get down to a 2% annual inflation rate. So we're going in the wrong direction. And then I was looking at some of the items that really drove the increase we saw this month. shelter and food prices.
Interesting.
Right? And so you think about it, that means that necessities are going up. This is not something that you can say, oh, I'll buy food next month. So I think it just shows how sticky inflation is right now. And then you think about the economy that the next president is inheriting and all these threats of tariffs. It's not where we want to see inflation right now.
Although I did see your note. First of all, this was in line with expectations.
It was.
But I saw your note to the Bureau, which was that we shouldn't be panicking just yet. What did you mean?
So it's not like we're back up at 9% like we were in summer of 2022. So we're seeing prices increase at a slightly faster rate than they were. So I don't want folks to panic. It doesn't mean we're in dire straits yet. It's just a trend that's starting that we don't love to see.
And so when can people expect to feel some real relief because we've talked long about this, about how the numbers seem to trend in the right direction, but people aren't feeling any of that relief at home yet.
It's when wages outstrip inflation. We talk about this all the time. You go back to pre-pandemic, I mean, prices have increased over 20%. When you think about it on a cumulative perspective, you haven't got that same increase on your income. And so it's just going to take a long time, or a while, I should say, for that wage number to outstrip inflation where we are right now.
All right, Kelly O'Grady, always great to have you in studio. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, Moscow is accused of amplifying misinformation to stir tensions in the U.S. after Hurricanes Helene and Milton. U.S. intelligence officials say Russian media shared Telegram-generated artificial intelligence pictures. Those AI pictures push claims that the U.S. government has been denying people FEMA disaster relief funds. In an exclusive interview with our Nicole Skanga, agency administrator Deanne Criswell says the false narratives could hinder communities from getting the help they need.
Did the amount of weaponized disinformation after Helene and Milton surprise you?
It did. I mean, I'm always expecting some type of misinformation. We saw it in Maui. We've seen it in other events. There's always been some information out there about FEMA in some way, shape, or form. But the volume that we saw during Hurricanes Helene and Milton was something that I have never seen before. I mean, things like, if you get the $750 from FEMA and don't pay it back, they're going to take your home. Completely false.
And Nicole will have much more on her exclusive interview with Deanne Criswell in our 1 p.m. Eastern hour. Stick around for that. Meanwhile, the White House is responding to those mysterious drones that have been popping up over New Jersey. What we know and what we don't know. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Here's a look at some of the top stories we're following for you this morning. A missing Wisconsin kayaker who police say faked his own death is now in custody. 45-year-old Ryan Bogward was reported missing in August when he didn't return from a kayaking trip that led to a 54-day search. But the local sheriff determined he'd actually fled the country. Investigators say he told them he faked his death so he could leave his family and start a new life. Task force investigating the assassination attempt against then-candidate Donald Trump released its final report on the Secret Service response to the shooting. The 180-page report says what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania was, quote, preventable and should not have happened. It also claims that there were failures in planning and leadership, along with execution. The report says the agency should reduce the number of people it protects and should consider whether it needs to continue investigating fraud and financial crimes. You may remember, of course, that the agency used to be part of the Treasury Department before it was switched to Homeland Security back in 2003. And the White House is weighing in on those mysterious drones popping up across New Jersey and parts of New York City. Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre says the drones are not foreign, but federal investigators are taking a look at these drones. Officials in both states are calling for more action. CBS News New York reporter Nick Calloway has more on these very strange sightings.
We're over Lake Hopatcong, and we've got a drone flying over.
Residents are still spotting those hovering objects circling the skies up and down the state of New Jersey.
And another one over here.
State and federal officials insist there is no known threat to the public at this time. While the FBI investigates, Governor Phil Murphy says the drones are hard to track.
These are apparently very, as I understand it, very sophisticated. The minute you get eyes on them, they go dark.
Many in the Garden State are getting frustrated with the lack of communication to the people who live here. Congressman Josh Gottheimer, a Democrat, is asking the FBI to brief the public on the drone activity.
There's been not enough information disclosed to the public from federal law enforcement officials.
Ryan Hurd, Republican mayor of Pequannock, is frustrated by the lack of information from the governor.
And I want to know what's going on. Are my residents in danger? Is it something that we have to be worried about?
Republican State Senator John Bramnick says the governor should issue a limited state of emergency, banning all drones until the public gets an explanation.
At this point, shut it all down until we get information.
I'm told the New Jersey State Police and the state's Office of Homeland Security will give a drone briefing on Wednesday to give more information to mayors and local elected officials. That meeting will be closed to the public and to reporters. In Pequannock Township, New Jersey, Nick Calloway, CBS News, New York.
International news now. Israeli forces have carried out hundreds of strikes across Syria in the past days following the collapse of the Assad regime. Israeli military says it's targeting weapon stockpiles to prevent them from falling into the hands of extremists. I want to bring in CBS News senior national correspondent Charlie Daggett to talk more about this. So Charlie, just break down what we're hearing from the Israelis about these weapon stockpiles. Have they completed those targeted missions?
Vlad, no, is the short answer. They're going to continue to pound military assets of Syria, as you said, so they don't fall into the wrong hands. But you have to ask yourself, who are the right hands? Because this is a militant organization that has taken over, at least the lead rebel group, that's taken over Syria for now. There are certainly splinter groups. They're at odds with each other, but they have taken out everything. I mean, they've taken out cruise missiles. They've taken out jets, fighter jets, naval assets, surface-to-air, surface-to-surface missiles, essentially obliterated Syria's military. Because frankly, as far as Israel is concerned, any threat to the north is a threat. And they're taking an opportunity to take out those military assets. I should tell you that the United States has not been involved in any of those operations, aside from the fact that they kind of run the neighborhood in terms of air traffic control because of U.S. forces in the region. But this is all Israeli-led.
Let me ask you about U.S. military assets in the region. What do we know?
Yeah, well, multiple assets, Vlad. Forward postured, I guess, is the way they like to describe it here. Because, we've been talking about this for weeks. The events have been unfolding so fast in the region. The United States had already beefed up the military presence in response to the threat to Israel by Iran and Hezbollah. So in that regard, if you're taking notes, the Harry S. Truman carrier strike group is in the Mediterranean, along with 3 destroyers, a Gettysburg cruiser. In addition, there are 2 other destroyers in the Red Sea. They've just responded to a Houthi threat in Yemen once again, intercepting missiles in that ongoing mission. But in addition, what we saw over the weekend, right, we had air assets, U.S. air assets, namely B-52s, F-15s, A-10 attack aircraft. And those are involved in one of the largest waves of airstrikes inside Syria in months. Now, on the ground, there are 900 U.S. forces, largely special forces, inside Syria, working with Kurdish allies. In Iraq, maybe another 4,000. That fluctuates according to rotations. And broadly across the region, another 40,000 U.S. service members, depending on how far back you pull.
Finally, Charlie, how does the situation developing in Syria complicate the sort of broader scope of stability in the Middle East?
Yeah, Vlad, I really can't overstate the volatility at the moment. They may have cut ties with al-Qaeda, but this main rebel group, HTS, is an Islamist militant organization. Okay, its leader, Abu Muhammad al-Jawlani, remains on the U.S. and UN terror list for attacks against U.S. troops. This is a man who fought beside ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi until they split, went their separate ways. His former group, al-Nusra, was feared in that region, blamed for a number of atrocities against civilians. And elements within that group are still sworn enemies of elements within U.S. allied groups. Now, officials here tell me Jawlani has been making all the right noises so far. I should point out there are no direct communications between anybody in this building and the HTS, a designated terror organization. That's being done through partners on the ground. They stress that repeatedly. But he said the West has nothing to fear, that different groups have the right to live together. But again, you just have to look at what Israel's been doing for the past few days. They're bombarding every meaningful part of Syria's former military. They just don't want to take any chances with whoever is going to be in charge in the future.
All right, Charlie Daggett, reporting from the Pentagon for us this morning. Charlie, as always, we appreciate your reporting and your analysis. Thanks.
Thanks, Vlad.
All right. President-elect Donald Trump has just announced a litany of political picks and other appointments. He fired off nearly 10 of them overnight. Among them, the ex-girlfriend of one of his sons, along with the Missouri Republican who was subpoenaed by the House committee leading the Capitol riot investigation. CBS News political reporter Libby Cathy joins me now from West Palm Beach. All right, Libby, the pick that seems to be getting the most attention, I'm sorry, is Kimberly Guilfoyle. What did the president ask her to take on?
Yeah, that's right, Vlad. Kimberly Guilfoyle getting a lot of attention, tapped as ambassador to Greece. Now, Guilfoyle was the former girlfriend to Donald Trump Jr., the eldest son of the president-elect. But they have not been spotted together in several months now. She was a staple on rallies, at debates. You remember the this too I forget her famous quote. But anyway, Kimberly Guilfoyle spoke at the RNC, getting a lot of attention. This really continues the trend of Trump of rewarding those who are loyal to his family, have close ties to his family, and those who are good talkers, experience with television. Guilfoyle, a former Fox News host as well. And if you go a few years back from that, you also remember she was the wife of Democrat Governor Gavin Newsom. Now, very much in the Republican MAGA circle now, maybe not so much in that Donald Trump Jr. inner circle, now going over to Greece, but definitely a big appointment. And Donald Trump Jr. taking to Twitter last night to congratulate her. Also, Kimberly Guilfoyle taking to Twitter to accept the appointment. But among a flurry of appointments we saw out of Mar-a-Lago last night, Vlad.
Yeah, she still has to get through that Senate confirmation. We'll see what happens there. Let's talk about the other 4 different ambassadors that the president-elect has named. 2 FTC officials, the Office of Management and Budget posts. Who are some of these other folks?
Yeah, let's talk about the Office of Management and Budget. That is at the White House. That is a really coveted position because you are going to the White House every day. And continuing this trend of elevating those from the Republican House of Representatives, that slim majority Republicans have. Speaker Mike Johnson has said, please stop tapping my picks. But Trump continued to do that again. North Carolina Congressman Dan Bishop is going to be in the Office of Management and Budget. And also Ed Martin. This may not be a household name, but absolutely notable because Martin was subpoenaed by the January 6th committee because he was at the Capitol on January 6, 2021. He is a leader in this so-called Stop the Steal movement. Obviously, President Joe Biden was elected president in 2020, but he does not subscribe to that belief. And he is going to be chief of staff at OMB. So continuing this trend of appointing those who are just absolutely fervently loyal to Trump, sometimes despite the facts. And those, the Office of Budget and Management, you do not have to have a Senate confirmation. They will just be going over to the White House. Vlad.
You know, it's interesting. This is much different from the first Trump administration, where he was relatively cautious in making his appointments. We were much further along in the process than we were at this time back in 2015, 2016. Is there a sense from some folks in his party that this is moving too fast, or is this considered, at least for the president-elect, the new way of thinking about how to make these appointments?
Well, a lot of Republicans I've spoken with say that they are on Trump's timeline with this. So this is absolutely faster than it was the first time around. But Trump's team says that is twofold. One, because he wants to be ready on day one. They want to have all of these picks lined up. And 2, because he knows Washington better. He knows what to expect at the White House. He knows more from government, obviously more of a newcomer the first time around. So that's why they say you're seeing this pace of picks come out of Mar-a-Lago. He already has the cabinet, at least those nominees, those picks filled out. So now we're just starting to see those ambassadorships, those chief of staffs, those other level appointments, FTC, for instance, some of those picks last night. But really, they'll be trickling in, and we'll see if by Christmas, most of those names will already be out, Vlad.
All right, Libby Cathy for us this morning. Libby, thank you, as always. Appreciate it. A federal judge blocked a potential $25 billion merger between grocery chains Kroger and Albertsons. Now, Albertsons says it is giving up on the merger and has filed a lawsuit against Kroger, alleging it did not do enough to secure the deal. In a statement, Kroger says it refutes the allegations from Albertsons and says it is an attempt to deflect responsibility following the company's written notification of Albertsons allege multiple breaches of the agreement. All right, and check out this satellite image of the Franklin wildfire that we're continuing to monitor out of Malibu, California. It is now so large it can be seen from space. More than 3,000 acres have been destroyed so far amid those high winds we've been telling you about. So let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with another look at the national forecast. Hey, Grant.
Hey, Vlad, look, I mean, the low relative humidity yesterday in portions of Southern California combined with those incredibly dangerous gusty winds really just made for prime and very scary fire conditions. There has been some improvement today, especially this morning. Still an elevated risk. The fire concerns are still mainly in Los Angeles County, Ventura County, where we've got a red flag warning that will continue through the rest of the day today. Now, winds yesterday were sustained 40 to 45 miles per hour, gusts upwards of 70 to nearly 80 miles per hour. Those gusts could go up to around 50 to 50 miles per hour this afternoon. Still very dry conditions near the ground. So we'll watch those conditions throughout the day. We'll start to see a little bit more improvement across the region tomorrow, but still an elevated risk for those higher fire dangers through Southern California throughout the day today because of those dry conditions, those low relative humidities, and those gusty winds. Now, over on the East Coast, a pretty substantial cold front stretching from the Gulf of Mexico all the way up the eastern seaboard, where all along there we've got the threat for some strong to potentially severe storms. There's about 10 million, almost 11 million people underneath that slight risk for severe storms today. The primary concern is going to be damaging winds, but we cannot rule out some tornadoes in portions of eastern North Carolina. We'll track that behind that system, much colder air on the way. Vlad, back to you.
All right, Grant, thank you very much. Let's take you live now to Capitol Hill, where the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, is testifying before the House Foreign Affairs Committee about the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. Let's listen. There appears to be some kind of disruption. Let's watch.
Disruption of committee proceedings is against the law. Holding up signs or making verbal outbursts during the proceedings is disruptive and will not be tolerated. Any disruption will result in a suspension of the proceedings until the Capitol Police can restore order. This includes the raisings of hands and other forms of disruption. With that, I now recognize the Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to say how much I've valued and appreciated working with you these past 4 years, the dialogue that we've had, including with this committee, where we've agreed, where we've disagreed, including on Afghanistan. I want to recognize everyone who served in Afghanistan, including on this committee. Our thoughts are with the Gold Star families of the 2,461 American service members, as well as State Department and USAID employees.
You can sleep at night when you're killing so many kids.
The committee will suspend while the Capitol Police restore order to this committee. The gentleman will continue.
As I said, our thoughts are with all of the Gold Star families. They're with the State Department and USAID employees who lost their lives over the course of 20 years of our military involvement in Afghanistan. And I think today especially of the 13 heroes that we lost at Abbey Gate, and I deeply regret that we did not do more and could not do more to protect them. And to those families who are here with us today, you're in my thoughts, in my prayers. I wish that Nicole was here with us today. I'm deeply sorry that she's not. I'm also deeply grateful to the dedicated professionals from the State Department, from the Defense Department, from across the government, from civil society, other partners who did so much to support the people of Afghanistan over those 2 decades.
You scum! What if your victims of
Committee will come to order.
People will never let you forget.
Committee will suspend while the Capitol Police restore order.
You fucking slide that!
Committee will come to order. The gentleman will continue.
Thank you. I'm here today to continue the department's extensive cooperation with this committee. As you know, Mr. Chairman, the department's provided over 20,000 pages of documents to you. We've conducted 9 high-level briefings for members. We facilitated transcribed interviews for more than 15 people. I personally testified before the House and Senate committees 14 times with questions on Afghanistan, including 4 times before this committee. Now, I believe that any attempt to understand and learn from the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan has to be put in the proper context of what preceded it, both in terms of the 2 decades following 9/11 and the decisions and events of 2020 to 2021 that culminated in the removal of our personnel. When President Biden took office, he inherited an agreement the previous administration had reached with the Taliban to remove all U.S. forces from Afghanistan by May 1st of 2021. At U.S. insistence, the Afghan government had released 5,000 Taliban prisoners, including top war commanders. The United States reduced our own troop levels from 14,000 to 2,500 in December of 2020. In return, the Taliban agreed to stop attacking U.S. and partner forces, to refrain from threatening Afghanistan's major cities, and to pursue intra-Afghan negotiations toward a ceasefire and a political settlement. But it continued a relentless march in the countryside so that it controlled or actively contested territory containing 3/4 of Afghanistan's population by December 2020. In January 2021, the Taliban was in the strongest military position it had been in since 9/11, and we had the smallest number of U.S. forces in Afghanistan since 2001. Despite the profound effects of the Doha Agreement, President Biden ultimately opted to implement the previous administration's decision to withdraw American troops and honor his pledge to end our nation's longest war. To the extent President Biden faced a choice, it was between ending the war or escalating it. Had he not followed through on his predecessor's commitment, attacks on our forces and allies would have resumed, and the Taliban's assault on the country's major cities would have commenced. That would have required sending tens of thousands more U.S. forces back into Afghanistan to defend ourselves and prevent a Taliban takeover, with at best the prospect of restoring a stalemate and remaining stuck in Afghanistan under fire indefinitely. President Biden inherited a deadline, but no plan to meet it. At his direction, beginning in the spring of 2021, the administration, and the State Department in particular, engaged in extensive planning for a whole range of outcomes. We pursued a sustained campaign to urge any Americans in Afghanistan to leave. We restarted and dramatically increased resources to what had been a moribund special immigrant visa program to bring Afghans who had worked by our side over 20 years to the United States. Even the U.S. government's most pessimistic assessments did not anticipate that the Afghan government and security forces would collapse so rapidly in the face of Taliban advances. Nevertheless, because of the administration's extensive interagency planning and coordination, when Kabul fell on August 15th, the United States was able to evacuate our embassy and relocate our diplomats to the airport within 48 hours, and then conduct the largest airlift in U.S. history, helping approximately 120,000 Americans, Afghans, and citizens of allied nations depart Afghanistan in just 2 weeks. In the 3 years since the end of our country's longest war, all of us, including myself, have wrestled with what we could have done differently during that period and over the preceding 2 decades. I asked retired Ambassador Dan Smith, one of our most senior diplomats, to lead an after-action review of the State Department's actions between January 2020 and August 2021. In response to Ambassador Smith's report, the Department has taken more than 40 concrete initiatives and identified steps to guide our response to future crises. The actions we've taken have already made a difference in subsequent emergencies, including in Sudan, in Israel, in Lebanon. Even as we work to address the places where we fell short.
All right, folks, you've been watching the Secretary of State Antony Blinken testify on Capitol Hill about the withdrawal from Afghanistan. If you were watching from the very beginning with us, you will notice, or you will have noticed, that his testimony was interrupted by protesters several times. Of course, Republicans have criticized the Biden administration's withdrawal from Afghanistan. We're going to continue to monitor this hearing and dip back into the testimony over the next several hours. So stick around for that. Meanwhile, residents in Haiti are asking for more protection after a gang leader reportedly went on a killing spree targeting hundreds of elderly people. The very latest on the dangerous situation next. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. The White House is condemning a gang-led massacre in Haiti that targeted mainly elderly people. Nearly 200 people were killed. This is just the latest example of the growing violence in the country that has forced thousands from their homes, leaving many without food and other basic needs. I want to bring in Haiti and Caribbean correspondent with the Miami Herald, Jacqueline Charles, to talk more about this. So Jacqueline, first break down just exactly what happened.
Well, what we know so far is that a gang leader in Cité Soleil, who was actually part of this powerful coalition that tried to take down the government earlier this year, known as Vivre Ensemble, Living Together, his 6-year-old son was ill and subsequently died. But on the advice of a local voodoo priest, he was told that his son's illness was due to the elderly people in this particular area of Cité Soleil, which is the largest slum in the capital, and the area named Waf-Jeremy. So they went on a rampage starting from Friday night, well into the weekend. Even after the death, people were on lockdown. The numbers we've heard is as little as 110 to 184 plus. We still don't have a full accounting. People were shot, people were hacked with machetes, and then their bodies were burned.
It's just horrific. How is the international community responding to this? And what are people on the ground saying? I mean, there's very little that people who have very little means are able to do against these gangsters who have weapons. But oftentimes, as you know, Jacqueline, when things really get to a tipping point, oftentimes the local people do take to the streets themselves and try to retaliate against the gangsters. What have we seen?
I have to tell you, the day that we, as journalists, started to hear this, we were all in shock. And then the next day, on Monday, it was like the quietest day in Port-au-Prince. People were telling us, a lot of people had not even heard about what happened. And I can tell you, as we speak right now, we are hearing reports of another massacre that happened just north of the capital in the Artibonite area in a small town. So, the violence has become just so untenable. But at the same time, we're not seeing the outrage. And even the government was very slow to acknowledge what had happened, in Port-au-Prince, which is right there. But this is just horrible. And a lot of people, outside, and even within, a sort of shock. I mean, you become just so numb to it, but at the same time, it's so horrific and it's so chilling.
Indeed, horrific and chilling. Jacqueline, always appreciate you coming on to talk to us about what's happening there on the ground. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We're following the fast-moving wildfire in Southern California as it threatens homes and forces thousands of evacuations in Malibu. We'll have the very latest ahead. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Time Magazine has announced its 2024 Athlete of the Year. It is none other than Indiana Fever rookie Caitlin Clark. She's been breaking records and drawing crowds all year long. Clark scored the most points in NCAA women's basketball history back in February, and then she set rookie season records for both points and three-pointers, and also became the first rookie to get a triple-double. Fever games right now are the most watched WNBA games, and get this, the league has seen a record 54 million viewers and saw a nearly 50% rise in attendance. Congratulations to Caitlin Clark. All right, let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with a final look at the national forecast. Hi, Grant.
Hey, Vlad, good basketball weather on the East Coast today. You got rainfall from Florida all the way to the Northeast. Some severe weather possible in eastern North Carolina. Really cold air moves in behind that storm system. Lake effect snow then starts to pick up across the Great Lakes. Meanwhile, warmer across the southern Rockies and then back into the west, staying dry with those fire concerns in Southern California. Vlad, back to you.
All right, Grant, thanks so much. See you tomorrow. That does it for me, folks, but stay right where you are. After the break, Elizabeth Cook is live from San Francisco with all the breaking news from coast to coast. This is CBS News 24/7.